I'm going to give a brief overview of the Eat Lancet Commission that I co-chaired with Johan Rockström. This was a group of 35 scientists that was brought together by the Wellcome Trust to look at the issue of, as you had mentioned, how could we be able to feed the world a healthy and sustainable diet by 2050? And that would mean providing this healthy and sustainable diet to about 10 billion people who will inhabit the world at that time. The approach that we used was to start off defining a healthy diet based on evidence from short-term randomized trials with risk factors as outcomes, cohort studies and randomized trials with disease outcomes. We reviewed the world's literature on this. This was a major job. We spent almost 3 years doing this to define a healthy diet. And then once we had done that, we determined the consistency of what we thought to be healthy with planetary boundaries for greenhouse gas emissions and other environmental variables, also including food waste and agricultural practices. Again, that was based on a vast amount of literature, and it boiled down to this table, what we called our planetary health diet. Based on health, we found that there was quite a bit of flexibility, possible ranges for each of the major food groups here. Just for example, it's possible to be healthy on no grains, but grains up to 60% of energy, as long as they're primarily whole grains. I won't go through all the numbers here. We kept starchy vegetables fairly low because of health reasons, fruits and vegetables in abundance. Dairy foods for health, we thought that 0 to 2 servings a day would be healthy. But when we looked at planetary boundaries, we found that we couldn't feed everybody in the world 2 servings or 2 glasses of milk a day and be sustainable. So we kept that, our target number here at 1 serving a day. And notice for the animal source products, the ranges include 0 because vegans can be healthy. I won't again go through all the numbers, but this for a red meat, this amounts to about 1 serving a day, a bit more of poultry. But most of the sources of protein coming from plant sources. People want to have added fats in their diet, and they can be healthy if they're unsaturated oils like olive oil, soybean oil, canola oil. But saturated oils like palm oil we kept low for health reasons, and then kept sugar fairly low. Those are a lot of numbers, but in the end, it boils down to something pretty simple. As simple as 1 + 1, which hard to get more simple than that. Basically, this is what we would call, many people would call a flexitarian diet because it offers a lot of flexibility. Again, we could be a vegan if we want to, but it could include moderate amounts of animal source proteins, such as fish, poultry, eggs, and red meat. And the 1 + 1 is about 1 serving of dairy a day and 1 serving of these other animal source proteins. But that's on a base of mostly nuts, soy, beans, fruit, vegetables, whole grains, plant oils. We did a little reality testing to see if this was feasible. And as it turns out, this is very similar to the traditional Mediterranean diet, which has been associated with the best health statistics in the world back in the 1960s when people were following the traditional Mediterranean diet. At that time, Greek men were consuming about 35 grams per day of red meat plus poultry. Our Eat Lancet target numbers came out to 43 grams per day, so very similar. But the principles of this diet can be found in many traditional diets, dietary patterns. So that while the Mediterranean diet has been studied intensively, there are many ways to put this healthy diet together. We then looked at the gaps between the target numbers here for the various food groups and what various regions of the world are actually consuming today. For example, red meat in South Asia is below the target number, our reference diet number, but in North America, way over. So we can't say just simply increase or decrease. It really depends on the starting point. Starchy vegetables are too high in many low-income countries. But what's really important is that in almost every region of the world, fish consumption, vegetables, fruits, legumes, whole grains, and nuts are below the target numbers. If we look at diet quality around the world, putting all of these together, we see that every country could make major improvements. On a scale of 0 to 100, the best countries were about a number of 65 out of 100. The highest quality diets were in Japan, East Asia, Southeast Asia, not surprisingly around the Mediterranean regions, but some countries in Africa actually had high quality diets, although in many cases there's undernutrition, inadequate amounts of foods, and especially for children. A few places in Latin America had high quality diets, but again, room for improvement for everybody. We went on to calculate how much premature death we could prevent if everyone shifted to our healthy dietary targets. We used 3 different modeling methods. It came out that all 3 of them showed pretty similar results. For example, about 19 to 24% of premature deaths could be avoided. That amounts to about 11 million deaths per year. In some more recent analyses, we went on to look at specific causes of death, and we estimated that if we shifted to that healthy dietary pattern, the planetary health diet, that would reduce not just total deaths, but mortality due to cancer, coronary heart disease, stroke, respiratory disease, neurodegenerative disease, kidney disease, diabetes, and digestive diseases. So very broad benefits for health. What does this mean for agricultural production around the world? This is looking at a global basis, so it will be somewhat different in every country. But very importantly, the main narrative we hear is that we need to increase grain production by 60 or 70% by 2050 to meet demands. But that's based on the business as usual model. If we basically look at increasing population and shifts toward more animal source protein. So those are the yellow numbers here. But our 2050 planetary health diet and half waste is shown by the green bars. And so again, for grains at projection, business as usual, doesn't need to be if we mainly stop greatly reduce feeding grain to animals and using it to convert to ethanol to drive big cars. Fruits and vegetables need to be increased quite a bit. But they don't take much land at present. And so even doubling would really have pretty minor impact on land use. We found that dairy production could stay pretty similar to what it is today, but some redistribution. Importantly, though, red meat consumption would come down. Fish consumption, dry beans, lentils, soy go up. Importantly, nuts go up. But again, we use very little land overall in the big picture for producing these foods at the moment. So even doubling production would not mean major increases in land use. So that's a very quick overview. Again, these are approximate numbers, and they will be certainly different for every region and every country around the world. I was asked to give a few thoughts about implementing healthy, sustainable diets nationally and locally, and these are just a few thoughts. The panel members are more expert than I am in many of these areas, so I look forward to hearing what they say. But in general, I think for a country or a region, a good place to start is with traditional diets, and most of those are being lost today. So starting with them in designing goals and preserving what's being lost is very important. But some of them need to be modified given current knowledge and alternatives. Many of them are too high in salt, and certainly in northern countries, too high in animal source proteins. Education at all levels is very important, but I think we all know that that's necessary but not sufficient. And we need policies that support availability and affordability, policies that support livelihoods of producers and sustainable production methods. And we also, it's considered or talked about less, but carbon sequestration in food systems, because the IPCC plan for achieving control of greenhouse gas emissions does assume a major role of carbon sequestration from the food systems. And we still don't know exactly how to do that. So I'll stop there and look forward to what my colleagues on the panel have to say.